Hello and welcome. It is 2:30. It is the 18th day of January 2021. I am your grumpy guide to all things gaming. The man with no plan, the OG GM with another OG GM adventure. It's a video response to my friend DM Bloodworth, unscripted and unchained. So the other day I did what are my top 5 favorite role-playing games of all time. So he said, well, I'm going to do that, but I'm just going to do the most played hours per top 5. So, but is that necessarily the same thing? Because I played lots of hours of 5th edition D&D. I don't know if it's in my top 5. So, I've got to respond by what are the most hours played per hours of role-playing games? What are the top? And that's a hard one because I haven't done the math. I'm not sure how I do the math, but I played a lot of Villains and Vigilantes, and I played a lot of various editions of D&D. If you put all the editions of D&D together as one just lump, Dungeons and Dragons, the Dungeons and Dragons hours may exceed the Villains and Vigilantes hours. But if you're looking at each edition of Dungeons and Dragons as a separate entity, like 2nd edition hours versus 3rd edition hours versus 5th edition hours, then maybe Villains and Vigilantes is ahead. I have to do the math. That's a hard one because I don't know. But I'm just, as a game, Dungeons and Dragons, as a game, Villains and Vigilantes, as a game, Mutants and Masterminds, not just each edition. I'd say probably Dungeons and Dragons is slightly ahead of Villains and Vigilantes. 2nd edition is most hours played. Then following that, Heroes Unlimited. I played a lot more of Heroes Unlimited than I ever thought about because I played a lot of it in college. I played a lot of it out of college. So that's probably in the top 5. Definitely the top 3 is Dungeons and Dragons, Villains and Vigilantes 2nd edition, Heroes Unlimited, Top Secret. I played a lot of Top Secret in college. I played at least 2 years in a Top Secret game, so that might rank. GURPS. Played a lot of GURPS. But then the GURPS fad kind of ended. There's like the hours per game before college, there's the college, and then there's the after college. And if we just go like hours per game after college, Dungeons and Dragons, it's like all I've pretty much played, with an occasional exception, is some version of Dungeons and Dragons since the year 2000. So that's why Dungeons and Dragons probably exceeds Villains and Vigilantes. But people wanted to, experiment more in my college years. There's a lot of games we did one-shots of. Coming out of college, occasionally there were games of Rifts or Marvel but yeah. Now there's probably a lot of hours of Star Wars in there, but I think it would have to go Dungeons and Dragons, Villains and Vigilantes. It's tough. There's lots of games, I guess GURPS might exceed Top Secret and Heroes Unlimited, just for the amount of time and energy I played and put into GURPS. So GURPS, it's a tough one. Heroes Unlimited, Marvel, Top Secret, Cyberpunk, other shit. Yeah, so there you go. There's probably the most hours played, sadly, Dungeons and Dragons. I wish I could change that. Thank you very much. Now, we cannot do the best games and most hours played and favorite games without addressing what is the worst role-playing game of all time. And universally, that's considered to be Fatel, the role-playing game. It's just a god-awful, misogynistic, homophobic, racist role-playing game. And I've said this before. Probably, hands down, it is considered the worst role-playing game of all time. Except, I have been told that there are people who still enjoy the mechanical system of Fatel. and consider it a very good system. They hate they don't like the politics, but they've cut out the actual mechanics of Fatal, erased everything else, and just like, okay, but just the mechanic wise, this is a decent system we can do something with. So, is it the worst? I mean, I guess. So really, is this the worst role-playing game or the worst role-playing game system? Because apparently there are people who think the system behind Fatal is actually good. I don't know if that's correct. That's what I've been told. But just by sheer what's in it, Fatal is the worst role-playing game. Now, the worst role-playing game system I've ever personally seen, not just that these were bad games, just the math of the system was... There was a game called Swords Path Glory that we played a little bit in the early 90s. And that was just a horrible game system. Shadowrun First Edition. Just a disaster. And there's a short-lived superhero role-playing game called Chimera, which is one of the worst role-playing games I've ever seen. It's like, not only was it a horrible system, the people didn't even bother editing it. Cyborg Command, I guess, is another one that's considered pretty awful. A lot of people think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Palladium is a bad system, but then I think most everybody else thinks Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is actually a good system, so... I don't know. Generally, it is agreed upon that Fatal is the worst role-playing game ever made. Just because of the thought behind it and the completely wrong, vile, misogynistic, homophobic, anti-Semitic ideas that were in it. But, as I said, apparently there's supposedly, and I don't know if it's true, but it's what I've been told, people who think the Fatal system is good, just everything else about it is awful. So, worst role-playing system I can think of, just for sheer god-awful mechanics. What the hell were you thinking? Swords Path Glory. I don't know if anybody else played it. I think it was just me and Josh, and maybe one other person. It was just an awful system. But, again, this is all subjective to what I think, Because every system I think is great, there might be somebody who thinks it's the worst system ever. And for every system I think is awful, there might be somebody out there who thinks, that's the best system ever. You don't know what you're talking about. So, yeah, but we couldn't do all the best without addressing the worst. You're the best around. Nothing's ever gonna get you down. You're the best. Subscribe to my vlog.